everyone. Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Racing Line podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking MotoGP with Harry and Joe.
MotoGP? What are you talking about? We're doing NASCARs.
You're a dickhead. We're going to be talking about MotoGP, and we have our resident MotoGP expert away tonight with tonsillitis. So there'll be no Michael giving his in-depth insight to this weekend's race.
Miss you, Mike.
We do miss you, Michael.
He talks about MotoGP with such passion. It's going to be missed.
It's going to be hard because we just talk about it, the cold hard facts, and we need that expert opinion. But with all
I will say there will be a lot less Miller hate on this one.
Oh, there might be a little bit of Miller hate.
Can I say Miller gets a podium and the guy runs away. You can't hack it.
Yeah. So, if for those of you who are or are not aware, we've just had the penultimate race of the championship out in the Algarve in Portugal at Portimao. Bagnaia took the victory, followed by Mir. It was a pretty comfortable victory for Bagnaia. And then Jack Miller finished in third, closely followed by Alex Marquez. That would have been a fairly interesting end to the race, but we lost the final two laps due to a fall between the two KTMs of Miguel Oliveira and Iker Lecuona. If you haven't seen that crash, you might want to jump on YouTube and have a look. Pretty silly from Lecuona.
Nasty.
And it's pretty lucky that both drivers or both riders seemed pretty unscathed after that particular altercation. The race was an interesting race. It was definitely not the most entertaining race that we've ever seen, but I think the interest in this race probably stemmed from third all the way through to seventh.
It was the Mexican Grand Prix of motorbikes.
It was. Bagnaia was fairly comfortable. Mir had a very good qualifying position and start to this race, and we kind of were able to see what he can do from the front. Even if he wasn't able to match Bagnaia's pace. In third, we had Miller, who had a really strong race. Particularly considering his recent form, and he was pushed for the second half of the race by Alex Marquez all the way. Definitely the best race for the LCR rider all season. And then there was an interesting race going on between Zarco, Martin, Fabio Quartararo, who fell with a couple of laps to go, and then also Pol Espargaro had a fairly strong showing for Honda as well. So that second half of the top 10. Was quite interesting. There were changes. There was a lot of tight racing, which was great to see. But how did you guys see the race, and kind of what were your biggest takeaways from it?
I thought it was for use of a better word, relatively boring race. Not in terms like it was dead boring, but it was Pecco ran away with it, and he was the word I love is metronomic, because he was just bang. He was the most Jorge Lorenzo race I've seen since Jorge Lorenzo has not won a race. And Mir had a probably his best showing for the year as well. I can't believe he's never qualified on the front row before. It's considering he's a world champion. Miller had a great race. You said he needed to have one, and he did. He's had quite a few good qualifyings in a row, and he hasn't put it together in the race. So it was a good return to form, considering that now Ducati have won the Constructors' Championship. And I feel like the other weird thing from that race was that it has shown how far KTM have fallen. That was the biggest takeaway that I have from that race, because last year they ran away with the win at Portimao, and this year, the first bike was 8th or 9th, or maybe even 10th.
They would have been 10th and 11th with 9th and 10th.
9th, I think.
Binder ended up coming 10th, but it was only because Lecuona crashed into Oliveira. So they were, I think, 9th, 10th, and 11th going into the second last lap.
That was my real thought. It was relatively boring, but looking into the race, as a measuring stick, you can definitely see which teams had made ground and which teams definitely had probably it showed which teams have had a relatively lackluster season.
H, as someone still fairly new to the whole sport, what were your biggest takeaways and biggest thoughts after that race?
Yeah, look, I think Bagnaia, he looked on a different level, even compared to Quartararo in the race this morning or last night. The rate he was able to pull out that lead over the rest of the pack was awesome. I also loved the bikes on this track. I've obviously seen it in F1, but it just looked awesome. That pit straight where it dips down at the end for the right hander, they looked amazing coming over the top of that hill. Definitely weight. Yeah.
It must feel like a roller coaster for those guys, eh? It looks like it on a bike.
Yeah, I think Miller posted that on his social pages this weekend.
Miller was getting some decent airtime over that bump. That's for sure. Yeah, stopping. He was actually jumping the hump as well. He thought he was at Nipquin.
I also feel it was a better spectacle, that these bikes on the track compared to the ones I've watched at Silverstone, Austria, Coda, and even Misano last week. So that was, a thing that I took away from the race. But also disappointment was, I know he crashed out, but Quartararo, being the new world champion, and considering Yamaha second in the constructors, he didn't seem to have any pace throughout the race. As a newbie to was it due to the track layout and the bike not favoring the track, or was it just he's tapped out now that he's won the championship? Like I found it really surprising considering how far ahead the Ducatis were.
I definitely don't think he's tapped out, and the Ducatis are always good at that track. Recently, they've always had pace there. I think it just showed that when your bike's not on, how hard it is actually to move through the field just on talent. Especially like we've seen this over the last 2 years, how hard it is actually to just move through the field, and you can lose so much time so quickly when you get stuck behind someone.
If I elaborating on that a little bit further, something that was mentioned in the commentary, and then I was kind of thinking about it today as well. And it's kind of been a little bit of the history of Yamaha recently. Yes, they've definitely improved the bike this year. Quartararo has been super consistent, and we can't say enough about, the fact that he's gone 17 races without falling off the bike, and that's obviously why he was able to tie up the championship so early. But when we think about Maverick Vinales, when he was performing really well in the Yamaha, a lot of his race wins were when he started at the front and was able to get a lead and gap the field. Previously with Lorenzo, he used to win in the same way. And this year, it's been fairly similar for Quartararo. He's been able to qualify really well, get to the front early, and stay in the front. What we have seen is that when he doesn't start from the front, that Yamaha, for whatever reason, struggles to make its way through the field. I think part of that is obviously the fact that the competition between Ducati, Suzuki, and Honda is converging. Like they're all, pushing each other up. So that makes it a little bit harder. But that Yamaha, for whatever reason, over the last couple of years, yes, it's improved, but it struggles to make its way through the field. And I think its advantage as a bike is probably the fact that it is so rideable. And when you're in the lead, you can capitalize on that and do some really consistent lap times. But when you need to push to create some advantage on, for example, a Ducati, and when we see the all four Ducatis performing so well, when you need to push and when you need to kind of get out of your comfort zone and get off the racing line to make something happen, that bike struggles to make its way through the field.
I have a bit of a hypothetical. If we know Pecco crashed out in the last race, which gave Quartararo the championship, if he didn't crash out and wins this race, does Quartararo take away the championship this year, or does it go to Bagnaia?
I think if Quartararo doesn't win the championship yet last week, because Pecco stays on, he won't crash today. I think he settles, knowing that it's not his day, because he's still got a fairly strong championship lead. That's my takeaway from it.
Yep, fair enough. I thought it was interesting that he won the championship last week when Pecco was in front of him. And then again today, he was in front, like he was dominant.
Well, this is actually something that I was thinking about the second half of the MotoGP season. And I think what we actually lost this year, and it might have been to Quartararo's advantage, is a really good season with Bagnaia and Marquez. Because I think the last 5 or 6 races have shown that it's actually Bagnaia and Marquez that are really, racing each other hard and racing each other well. And we saw it in Aragon. We saw it
Oda.
We saw a race between there as well. I can't remember which one it was.
Misano, 1 and 2.
Misano.
1 and 2.
But if, I would love to have seen those two having more of a chance. I mean, it took Bagnaia a little bit to warm up to the team this season, I think, and that can't be understated. He's definitely taken the leadership position of the team, and he looks so comfortable on the bike, which is awesome. I think Marquez has had a fairly similar season, probably with more lows at the beginning of the year because of obviously he's come back to injury, but I think that's actually been the standout to me for the later part of this season.
Marquez was never racing for the championship, so I think that's why the start of the season he fell so much.
Yeah,
and that's the difference.
And I think he was also in a situation where he wasn't fit enough, so he thought, whatever happens, if I fall off, I'm not really, I'm not going to lose anything because, I might as well try to pull a gap and then conserve energy. But going into next season, with those two bikes performing and riders performing as well as they are, if they are qualifying on the front row with Quartararo, then it might be a lot more competitive season because, Quartararo does struggle a little bit to pass, bikes that are outperforming his for whatever reason. That's probably actually the bigger takeaway from the second half of the season for me.
I think like this race, the championship was done this race. So to find enjoyment in it, I enjoyed looking at larger picture things. And I do think that the biggest problem with Yamaha, and I've said it probably the last 2 podcasts, is just the inconsistency in their rider stable. There's no one really helping push the development, or even just at least pushing the other rider. I mean, Maverick's a great rider and he wins on days where he's feeling good, but he's never been, Mr. Consistent. And I think this week showed that when Quartararo finally falls, because you're always going to fall, there was literally no one there to pick up anything for Yamaha, like anything. And I know Frankie's still sore and injured, and they're saying that, but I mean, when you've got 5 Ducatis in the top 10 and 3 of them are satellite, and then your I think your Yamaha's are 17th, 16th, and maybe 13th. I mean, in terms of looking into the future, I feel that's just a massive problem.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's something I noticed too, obviously being new to the sport. And you're looking at the Constructors' Championship, you got Ducati, then you got Yamaha. And the highest Yamaha throughout most of the race was Quartararo in 7th or something. I just thought, what's going on here? It doesn't happen in other motorsport. So, yeah.
It has been a tumultuous year for Yamaha in terms of the whole Maverick thing. But still, Maverick gave them 106 points, which is a decent haul, but it's not enough for a team trying to win a Constructors' Championship. I mean, one thing actually he told me at the race that I was really happy with. I was really happy with the performance of Alex Marquez. We know he's a good rider. He's a world champion, but I just didn't see him taking the fight that hard. Not that because it was Miller, just to the top to a top 3 position. I just didn't see that coming.
You reckon he would have taken Miller? I reckon he would have taken him on that last lap.
It's interesting because the Ducati has so much more power. There's so many times you see it just take off from the Honda, but he did have the harder rear tire on, so he definitely had a bit more in the tank in terms of. Would have been interesting. I think we were robbed of a good ending.
100%, I agree.
Before we this is probably a good segue.
I feel like they give Alex Marquez his brother's bike whenever his brother's missing.
That's what actually I was going to talk about. So at the start of the week, and let's have a bit of time talking about Honda. So at the start of the week, we were kind of salivating over the prospect of Marc Marquez racing at Portimao and then coming up against Bagnaia, and that was really what we were talking about off air quite a lot. Late in the week, he has to pull out due to a concussion, and then we get to the race. Yeah, interesting. But we get to the race, and then no one can really, take it to Bagnaia. Were we robbed of another Bagnaia Marquez Classic this week potentially, because we saw Honda on as a whole performing quite well, and with Alex Marquez challenging for the top three, it's safe to say that Marc Marquez would have been pushing for the win.
How'd Nakagami go?
No, he was nowhere.
11th, I think.
And Paul was 9th or something.
Paul was 6th.
6th, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna say this right now. I don't know if anyone had anything for Bagnaia this week.
Well, Mir was only 3 seconds behind him.
Yeah, but 3 seconds in MotoGP these days is a lot.
Yeah, no, but
Like
you would assume that Marquez would be.
5 years ago, that's close, but this now it's nothing.
You would assume that Marquez would have been closer than that. That's the point I'm trying to make there.
You would, but like you saying, he was only 3 seconds from first to 17th. The bikes we finished, there was only 27 seconds. So 3 seconds is 1/10 of that. That's heaps between 17.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is Marquez would have been closer than what Mir
We'll
was.
never know. We'll never know. He doesn't like the right-handed corners, does he?
I don't think Marquez gives a crap what he's racing on, mate. He just chases.
We'll never know. I don't like those kind of hypotheticals. I just think this weekend was all about Bagnaia. Even his pole position lap was like Miller set an awesome lap, and you just knew that it was going to get broken.
And it wasn't even close.
It was
Really
what,
at the end.
it was 1/10.
I think it was 2/10 by the end of it.
It wasn't. I think it was like 1.0 because Miller set a faster lap as well. But
Well, can I just put a pin in the Ducati conversation for a second, because I do want to go there, but before we do go there, let's just stay on. We're having the conversation in our last MotoGP podcast about whether Honda had made genuine gains over the course of the season, and as I was watching this race, that was probably the biggest thing that I was taking away from, and it was probably a good thing that Marquez wasn't there, just to see how the rest of the stable performed. Alex Marquez had his best race of the year by far. Debatable whether he would have got on the podium or not, but regardless, he was really strong. Pol Espargaro was, with Quartararo, Zarco, and Martin for the whole race, and the fact that he was closing in on them and staying with them was actually, a very pleasant surprise for me. I don't think the bike is really fast enough to get past Ducatis at that particular track, so that wasn't an issue for me. But the fact that he was staying with them was really good, and I think I made the point last week that Honda has definitely improved this year, and I think that definitely has to be the case. When Brattle jumps on the bike and is faster than some of the Yamahas straight away, and I think he was faster than Nakagami as well. That's boding really well for Honda going into 2022, and then also just to see that they've got people on the satellite bikes that as the bike does improve, they can start taking it to the likes of the Ducati satellite teams, because I think that's really one of the key benefits for Ducati right now, is that they've got their riders at the front, and then behind them they've got their satellite team, and no one can get past them. And if you can't get past them, then you can't really challenge they're actually rear gunning for the Ducati team if we're talking about what we do in F1. But so how did you see that from a Honda perspective today, Joe and Harry? And do you have any other takeaways or insights from that?
Much to probably people's surprise, or not people's surprise, your surprise or Michael's surprise, is I still love seeing Honda doing well. I mean, I think the sport needs Honda to do well because they're the biggest name in motorcycle racing. I honestly do believe though that the reason that Honda are doing better is because their riders have stopped binning bikes. Like you don't get any information if you're binning bikes practice qualifying race. You can't make inroads, and I don't know if it's because they've made a better bike or because the riders have stopped binning their bikes and they can get a bit of data. Either one. The last 4 races, or maybe even 5 races, we've seen not just Marquez get close to the top, but the the rest of them come up. And at the start of the year, I would have said that Honda was worse than the KTM, and probably even the Aprilia. It is definitely better than both them bikes. 100%, like just as an overall bike, and even it's probably better than the Suzuki in the hands of market, 100%. But for the rest of them, like it's definitely risen in the pecking order of favorable bikes.
Yeah, I think we also need to
Probably
take
better bikes than the Yamaha in terms of on average, or Quartararo on the Yamaha.
just echoing what we said last week as well. I think that the fact that Marquez is back on the bike and can give some direction for how to set the bike up. Like, I mean, you got to think Alex Marquez has only been on the bike. This is only his second year. You've got Pol Espargaro, who's new to the team as well, and Nakagami, who's got no confidence. So the fact that they've got Marquez back, who can at least give some baseline direction for how to set up the bike, for each race meeting, has helped to improve. But I think the biggest thing, or the biggest takeaway, was the fact that he wasn't there, and the team still performed, really well, which was great to see. All right, so let's move on.
I'm going to hit you quickly.
Yeah.
Actually, no, we'll do this a bit later, so I keep moving.
Yeah. So the next point was obviously the Ducati conversation. Miller came third. He did really well. I think that Bagnaia by now has really cemented himself as the front-running rider on the team. I think just objectively that has to be the case, and it definitely wasn't the case to start the season. He was definitely coming in as the number 2 rider. What does Miller have to do to regain that thing, or do you think he can regain it going into 2022, or Bagnaia is just better? Because realistically, he was the guy that was supposed to be fighting for the championship, and Bagnaia has been, the rider that looks like he's got the consistency to win a championship.
That's something I've noticed watching the races that I've watched. Miller seems to struggle for pace compared to Bagnaia. And one of my questions was, do you think this similar theme? Do you think it's going to be a theme moving forward from here on in for Ducati, or is it just this specific bike that Miller's struggling to ride compared to Bagnaia?
Well, I think Bagnaia is I'm going to put this out there. I think Bagnaia is a more consistent and a quicker rider. I think even last year he showed a lot of flashes of. But I don't think Miller has to do anything more than what he's done this year, as long as he cleans up a few of these crashes. Because let's put it this way: they're the team's champions. He's done enough to get that team the team's championship, and Ducati are also the constructors' championship. He's got 2 wins this year. I mean, in terms of a second rider, I mean, what more can you do? I mean, other than not bending your bike as much as he has, but realistically, pulling up the statistics, 165 points, and he's 4th in the championship. That's a pretty good showing on your first year in a new team.
Yeah, I listen. I get that, and that's it. Like, we have to take into consideration that it is his first year on the factory team. It's easy for us to forget that, but I think we've spoken a lot about the depth of talent that Ducati have behind their top 2 riders. And I don't know if you've got the stats there for how many times he's fallen this season.
Well, all I can tell you is that he's the 2nd-ranked Ducati on this list, and
but he's riding for the factory team, and when you've got people like Martin and Bastianini behind him, who are doing a lot, they seem to be doing a lot better on less machinery, and by better I mean by what they're expected to be doing. Is there some pressure that will be on him next year to perform at an even higher level?
I think next year he still needs to be in second, at least the 2nd best ranked Ducati, 100%. But I mean, in terms of what he's done this year, he hasn't had a great year, but he definitely has. He's probably had his best year in MotoGP still, in terms of how many points he's got. He's got 2 wins. He's got a few podiums. He's I mean, but for Pecco's amazing qualifying sessions, he'd have a few poles as well, to be honest. I mean, he set a few lap records that have been broken seconds after by his teammate.
Yeah, I don't know.
And he's well liked. He's not a dick in the team. Like, the team respect him, and he doesn't cause any problems. I mean, I'm gonna say this right now. If in the trajectory that this team is heading, he probably won't be a world champion if Pecco's next to him, but he'll snag a few wins, and he'll be an awesome rider for the team, and he might even get it if he something together. He might get something, but I mean, I don't know what more you could ask for him, to be honest. I mean, other than don't bin the bike as much.
I think that's probably been the biggest problem with his season this year. I think that, and that's probably been the biggest thing that makes his season look so much worse than Bagnaia, because had he stayed on the bike in some of those situations, that championship's a lot closer. And we want to see an Australian champion, and obviously he just might not be as fast as Pecco on that bike. But I think, consistency is probably where he has to start. But I guess we'll find out in 2022.
I'll just say this as well. Like, if we're super critical of him because he's the only Aussie in the sport, and we want our sportsmen to be doing well because he's the only one in the sport. But I mean, there's only one Frenchman, one Italian, and one Spanish in front of him. So he's still, like, it's not like he's doing a bad job.
No, it's definitely not. But like the point I was trying to make was he was touted to be the number one rider for Ducati, right? And that everyone was saying it.
I don't think he was, to be honest, because he only got a 1-year contract and Pecco got a 2-year contract.
Fair enough.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, the next point that I wanted to raise anyway, obviously the season's winding down, and it's more, we're doing a lot of reflecting now as opposed to, thinking about what the next race holds. But you made the point earlier that KTM has really struggled this year. And I think they really have. I think in a qualifying point of view, they have been nowhere. In a race spec, Binder's kind of always pulling it out from 18th to 8th in the last 3 or 4 laps, which is insane. Earlier in the season, we spoke about how the fact that they lost a lot of their concessions might have impacted them. We saw a similar thing with Suzuki after their second season in the sport. They kind of struggled as well. But when we think about the state of the manufacturers in the sport, and we think about KTM in particular, what are your overall feelings? I mean, we spoke about today Yamaha not being probably as competitive as we expected. I think Ducati by far at this particular stage are the bike to be on. And I think the fact that the satellite team is able to perform so close to the factory team.
Satellite team. They're a factory team.
Well, that's what I mean. The fact that they are performing so close to the Ducati factory team, speaks volumes for how much they've developed that bike. But where do you see Honda in the mix? Where do you see Suzuki? I think we saw a step up for Suzuki in particular today. Hopefully they're able, that squat device that they've put on the bike now helps to improve their qualifying positions, because we see where Mir can finish up when he's qualifying well. But what is your overall takeaway on the manufacturer kind of hierarchy right now in MotoGP?
Do you have anything for this, Harry, mate?
No, look, boys, I'm still learning. So at the moment, I see Ducati as from what I'm seeing, Ducati's the quickest bike. Obviously, Quartararo is the most consistent rider, but again, after today, I don't know how he's won the championship. Obviously, really good qualifying.
He hasn't crushed till today.
And that too, yep. And Marquez, the last 5 races or so has been on fire. So they're the 3 that I'm kind of looking at for next year. But, obviously I'm still learning the sport, so don't take my word as gospel.
How are you enjoying it? That's probably a good question.
Yeah, look, it's good. I'm struggling with the length of the race. It's really quick. 21 or 22 laps or whatever it is. Also, for me, look, being new to the sport, I don't see the strategy coming into play as much. It's kind of,
I think this has been a bad year to get into the sport. I feel like last year would have been a much better year to get into the sport.
Yeah.
Last year was wild. But yeah, like this year has been Quartararo and then people chasing for a lot of it.
And yeah, like the strategy, like they have tire choice and all that kind of thing. And, I've noticed there is a bit of tire preservation and all that kind of stuff going on. But other than that, there's not much, compared to Formula One, I guess. But, I'm enjoying it. It's, the wheel-to-wheel racing is awesome. They get really close to each other, but I'm still learning all the different rules and all that kind of thing. So enjoying it so far.
Going back to what we were talking about before, Joe, and the hierarchy of it, do you have any takeaways?
I've got too much. I'll be here all night.
Let's try to be succinct.
I'll try and be succinct. All right. So I think everyone knows that the general consensus is that the Ducati is the best bike, and realistically, it probably is the best. Having said that, there is still definitely work to be done on that bike, because I think one thing everyone not forgets, but no one mentions, is that bike is so much quicker than the other bikes. But I think its quickness makes it also harder for it to stop. And I think in terms of their tire preservation, the actual putting down of the power rips up the rear tire easier if you're not careful. And I think the extra speed puts braking on the front, puts more pressure on the braking, which then can also rip up the front tire.
Is that why they've gone hards on Miller's bike before in the past when we've questioned?
I definitely there has to be tire preservation problems with the bike. Yeah, because they're the only team that does these weird things when they put double hards on the bike for both, and unexplainable, except if you've got tire preservation problems. And that's even going back for years. It's not just this year. So there's definitely work to be done on that bike, but in general, it is probably I don't know if it's the most rider friendly bike, because it definitely does spit you off a few times as well. But you want to be
pretty ergonomic, that bike.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, as I was looking on my little graph before, like, you've got the three of the top five Ducatis, and they're all relatively close. So kudos to them. And you know what? I was thinking about this as well today. If you invest as much money in actual in your team, factory support, putting riders on factory contracts, helping out your satellite teams, kudos to you. Like, you actually you're reaping the rewards of actually being doing it the right way. And
all
then
right. Give me your hot take then on Suzuki right now.
Need a satellite team.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing this weekend.
They haven't got enough bikes, because I think that's all I can say.
They don't have enough data.
They've got two good riders, and they always seem to be chasing the 8-ball. You saw it at the start of the year when they would always have to come through Q1, both bikes. You know what I mean? Get a satellite team. Like, that's the longest. And this, I think the interesting thing is that there are a few teams out there who would probably be happy to be their satellite team.
What teams do you reckon? So from your point of view, what teams would be the ideal satellite teams for Suzuki? Just in relation to being established, and
I would have got Gresini, because they do a good job with everything they do, really, I think.
Well, that's interesting, because Gresini is leaving Aprilia at the end of this season.
They're going to Ducati there, but I think that's a
Off of Fabio Giantonio.
Yeah, I just think it's a missed opportunity. And even, like, having said that, you would have thought that Gresini, I think that's the same thing with Aprilia, but I think they're a bit they've got a ways to go more than Suzuki in their GP journey, and I can see them getting one maybe the year after next. But I honestly just believe Suzuki get a satellite team. Like, that's it. In terms of what's up, Harry?
Is that like a feeder team?
Yeah, so it's like you can give a team, they have factory support, they run factory bike.
Just get more data from them
Just
too.
Get more data. Like, if you think about next year, I think Ducati might have 5 or 6 factory bikes on the grid. That's 5 or 6 data traces that you don't have.
Mhm.
Um,
I think that I was literally thinking the same thing earlier in the week. And I think last year it's interesting because this is another point that's probably up for a good discussion. But I think last year Suzuki got a little bit, they overestimated how
Fortuitous.
well they performed. They obviously didn't have Marquez, and a lot of the people they were racing against were falling. And Mir had a super consistent year. He didn't qualify in the front row once. I'm not saying he's not a great rider because he's proven that he's really quick, but I think they overestimated how good that bike was. And they didn't realize that once Honda got their act together when Marquez came back, once Yamaha improved their bike a little bit more as well, Ducati improved. They put riders that, were staying on the bike longer, but also they kind of got a bit more corner speed. And I don't think they really reacted as well. So I think next year for Suzuki is huge. But at the same time, I was also thinking until they get 4 people riding that bike and they can try some new things on some of those feeder bikes as well, give them a part, try this, what do you think? Until that happens and they get a little bit more information, they're always going to be on the back foot. So I think that's a really good point.
Think about how much quicker they could have got on top of their whole squat, squat and what's it called?
Yeah.
The whole shot device if they could run different variations on different bikes.
And you spoke about Aprilia as well, saying they're not at the same level, but they kind of are getting to a similar point now. What we've seen from Aprilia this year is that they
need 2 riders. They need 2 consistent riders, and that's what they're going to have next year.
They do need that, and they've got that. But I think they can also probably alleviate some of the issues that Suzuki's facing now if they get into the satellite team a little bit, or the satellite game a little bit earlier than Suzuki has. And I think that for them, it's been awesome to see how much they've developed. I think they need, firstly, a top tier test rider, which they don't have. So that needs to happen. KTM have Pedrosa. We saw what that did to the team last year. Yamaha have Lorenzo again.
And Crutchlow.
Honda have Bradle, who's been doing good things all along. Aprilia need that rider. Now, whether it's Dovi moving forward.
Yamaha now.
Yeah, I know that's going to be a problem, but they need to find someone that can do that job for them. I think that the satellite.
I don't think they need that a crazy test driver. Like I think Lorenzo Salvadori is a decent test driver. You see that Ducati have Michele Pirro, and he's done an awesome job for many years now.
But the good thing about Pirro is that he knows Ducati bikes like the back of his hand. He has been their test rider for 10 years. Do you know what I mean? Like what they get from him in relation to setting up the bike and being able to relate to, pieces of technology and information from years past as well. A lot of other teams don't have. So I don't know. I think Aprilia need, a test rider that's pretty current to the MotoGP field. Obviously it's not going to be someone like Petrucci, but for example, if they could get someone like that who had some experience.
Imagine if they could get Rossi, someone like Rossi.
I think Rossi's too washed up now.
To test ride.
I don't know. I think he's done. He's going to focus on his team.
Would he do it though? Like after all these years, would he become a test rider?
It would be good for them, like to have someone with that kind of information. But then I think they need, I don't know. I think Petrucci could be a really good test rider for Aprilia, but I think that's where they're at. They need a strong test rider, and I think they can probably get into satellite game. Maybe the year after next.
The biggest reason with the whole satellite thing that no one really brings up is that you just don't have enough time to test anymore. Like that is the biggest reason for needing a satellite team. You need to just get as much data as you can on the weekends.
And the satellite. But
there's enough good teams out there, like in the satellite game, that you should be able to find one. And I think there's been too many missed opportunities this year by teams. And Ducati apparently have a really well priced offering. So
I think the satellite bikes is actually becoming like the arms race in MotoGP to develop a more successful team. KTM got in it very early. and we can talk about KTM now because I think they have also been like the fact that they were so successful last year probably made them a little bit more confident than what they needed to be. I think Oliveira has been probably pushing a little bit too hard to make something happen with the bike, but they probably need a little bit more development because I think they were doing really well when a lot of teams were struggling. But now that a lot of those established teams have kind of been able to push their way and refine their concepts, they've kind of, I don't know if they've lost their way or if they just haven't developed at the same rate as, say, your Hondas and your Yamahas this year. So
they started well, two things. Number one, their whole thing last year was we're going to have 4 factory bikes on the grid. And we've seen with Honda and also with Ducati that's what you need to have. That's a prerequisite for success. I believe that now. And this year they I think it was with development that their original bike was a dud, and they had to redesign the whole swing arm for that bike, and they just didn't have enough time to develop or to build for factory bike while they were developing at the same time. Having said that, I think they had the same problem this year that Honda had at the start of the year. Too many riders were just dropping bikes. You weren't able to get the data. Next year's going to be interesting for them because they've got 2 rookies. I think that's going to be their hardest or the biggest thing to overcome is that you can't expect much from rookies next year. But even like we're talking about Bagnaia this year, he was dropping bikes left, right, and center last year, even though he was showing a lot of promise. So
they need someone like Martin, someone who's performed like Martin this year, really. And I think just to bring up the Moto2 Championship, I don't think they could have got 2 better riders to be taking or to be filling up those seats because
they've got one lightning rod and one probably much maturer, like taking a much more mature path to MotoGP.
I think we undersold Remy Gardner a bit last week because he came out.
You and Michael definitely did
because he did. He had such a fantastic race. I think we undersold him a little bit, and he's proved us wrong.
And I think Michael just hates. Yeah, I think Michael just hates any Aussie rider. To be honest.
No, I feel like we undersold.
Remy.
Not Remy Gardner. I think we undersold consistent and how big a role it plays in terms of becoming a champion.
I think they've got 2 studs, to be honest with you, though. And
100%.
And just to finish off the night, because we'll kind of leave it there now, but
Yamaha.
With Yamaha in the situation that they're in, I think Honda to a little bit of an extent as well. You've got teams like KTM and Ducati that are absolutely stacked in relation to young talent. And then we've got, the established teams like Honda. As long as Honda have Marquez, they're going to be a force. Yamaha do have Morbidelli and Quartararo, who are both really good as well. But that depth of talent behind them isn't really there. And we've been talking about the satellite bikes being so important now to development, to getting data. And that's hopefully something that we'll see in 2022 and I think it's awesome I think it's awesome for MotoGP to have satellite bikes and satellite riders that are mixing it with the big boys, because that's really what gives this competition the depth that it has. But with all of that, we've just lost Joey. I think, and with all of that being said, I think that's probably a good place to leave it there, H.
Yep.
MotoGP, 1 race to go in a fortnight's time at Valencia. We'll finish the season there. We can do a little bit of a review to finish the season and to look into 2022. But again, thanks so much to everyone for listening. Please like and follow us on our socials, Facebook and Instagram. Harry puts a lot of effort into creating engaging content for the fans. So give it a like. And most importantly, please keep sharing this platform with people that you think might be interested as well. So thanks so much, Harry. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, guys.
Even though you're not here, hope you get better, Michael, from your tonsillitis. And have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next week with the race review from Brazil, the F1 race in Brazil. So have a great night.